The reasons for Inger Stevens' untimely death at age 35. This is the reason behind the birth of Inger Stevens. On October 18, 1934, Ingrid Stenlund was born in Stockholm, Sweden. Per Stenlund, a high school teacher, and his wife Lesb were her parents. Her early years were characterized by both emotional and geographic instability. When she was a little girl, her father brought Inger and her brother to live with him in New York when her parents divorced and he went to the U.S. Much of Inger's tenacity and inner emotional complexity, qualities she would later apply to her acting roles, were shaped by adjusting to life in a new nation, language, and culture. Inger had a difficult upbringing. She lived with her father and stepmother in Kansas for a part of her adolescence, and she never really recovered from the loneliness and sense of dislocation she felt. She had exceptional intelligence and a strong love of the arts, in spite of these difficulties. At the age of 16, she fled her home and worked to support herself in New York City as a chorus girl and showgirl, among other professions. She eventually enrolled in the Actors Studio and studied under the esteemed Lee Strasberg, who taught her the subtleties of method acting and helped her refine her innate skill. Her emotionally charged and frequently subtle performances would subsequently demonstrate this training. Inger gained recognition for her remarkable Nordic beauty and her natural ability to portray strength, depth, and vulnerability when she started to participate in television anthology shows like Playhouse 90 and Studio One in the middle of the 1950s. In the 1957 movie Man on Fire, she starred alongside Bing Crosby as a lady torn between love for her son and loyalty to her husband. This was her breakthrough performance. This performance showcased her dramatic talent and exposed her to a larger audience. She gained notoriety fast, co-starring with some of Hollywood's biggest names, such as Anthony Quinn in A Dream of Kings 1969, which received praise from critics, and Harry Belafonte in The Flesh and the Devil 1959. Later on, she starred with Clint Eastwood in Hang 'em High 1968, one of her last film roles, where she showed off her adaptability and capacity to compete with strong male protagonists. But what really made her famous was her portrayal of Swedish governess Katie Holstrom in the popular sitcom The Farmer's Daughter, which ran from 1963 to 1966. She won the hearts of fans all around the country in this role by fusing emotional charm with humorous timing. Inger won a Golden Globe in 1964 for the popular series. Despite the humorous tone of the show, Inger's portrayal of the character emphasized her range as an actress and struck a profound chord with viewers. It paved the path for more dynamic women in television and was a unique example of a female character who was both intelligent and independent at the time. She starred in Gene Kelly's satirical comedy A Guide for the Married Man in 1967. Through a series of humorous vignettes, the film, which had Walter Matthau and Robert Morse among its ensemble cast, explored infidelity and marital seduction. In contrast to her usually benign roles, Stevens played one of the seductive women who seduce the main character. Despite playing a supporting part, Her performance was praised for its nuanced complexity and wit, demonstrating her range. Stevens's film career peaked in 1968 with three outstanding roles in big-budget films: Madigan, Five-Card Stud, and Hang 'em High. She was able to explore new genres and expand her creative horizons with each of these movies. Clint Eastwood's first American picture, following the triumph of the Dollars trilogy in Italy, was the gritty western Hang 'em High. Stevens portrayed Rachel Warren, a widow plagued by a painful history. Her portrayal gave emotional depth to a part that could have been neglected in a genre dominated by men, and reviewers praised the character's understated power. She starred with Dean Martin and Robert Mitchum in Five-Card Stud, another Western-themed thriller, that same year. The bar singer Nora Evers became involved in a string of murders among cowboys who played poker. Stevens delivered a multi-layered performance that blended sensitivity and astute knowledge. She once again proved she could compete with Hollywood's top guys, and her composure and on-screen persona enhanced the movie. Stevens played in Madigan, a 1968 police procedural starring Richard Whitmark and Henry Fonda, and directed by Don Siegel. Stevens gave Julia Madigan, a hard-boiled detective's patient wife, emotional dimension and sensitivity. The stress and loneliness of being married to a man who is fixated on his work were depicted by her. Even while the male characters were the main focus of the movie, Stevens' performance gave the procedural hardness a much-needed human counterweight. In her last theatrical production, A Dream of Kings 1969, she portrayed Anthony Quinn's dying Greek immigrant's wife. Stevens had a unique chance to portray a character with strong emotional ties and moral uncertainty in the moving drama, which explored themes of mortality, cultural identity, and optimism. She played Kali Matsukas, a woman who has to strike a balance between her husband's devotion and the difficulties of raising their son and running their household in America. It is still one of the most moving parts of her career, and critics praised her chemistry with Quinn and the maturity of her performance. Stevens had not completely given up on television in spite of the popularity and praise she received for her film work. She featured opposite rising star Burt Reynolds in the made-for-TV film Run, Simon, Run, 1970, which was her last motion picture. Stevens portrayed Carol Renard, a lady enmeshed in the perilous and emotionally nuanced world of a Native American man pursuing justice for the murder of his brother in this criminal drama. The film earned positive reviews when it was released and demonstrated Stevens' ability to approach weighty societal topics with passion and conviction. There was a lot of excitement surrounding her combination with Reynolds, and the two were said to get along well off-screen. Inger Stevens was about to make a career comeback when she passed away, unexpectedly and tragically, in April 1970. She had just agreed to play the lead in The Most Deadly Game, a brand new ABC television drama that revolves around a trio of renowned criminologists who crack cases that are both enigmatic and high-profile. Stevens was chosen for the main female part, which would have brought her back to weekly television viewers after a 4-year hiatus, and the show promised a chic and intelligent spin on the detective genre. Industry insiders were optimistic that the show would revitalize her career and expose her to a new audience when she finished the pilot episode. Unfortunately, Stevens died before the project could begin production. Although actress Yvette Mimieux was eventually cast in the part, the film was still plagued by the memory of Stevens' premature passing. Inger Stevens's first known marriage, which started in 1955, was to her agent Anthony Sglio. Sglio represented Stevens' interests while navigating the difficulties of being a young actor in a cutthroat and frequently male-dominated industry, and she was instrumental in helping to begin Stevens' early career in Hollywood. However, their marriage was short-lived, ending in divorce in 1957, barely 2 years later. Although the reasons behind their split were never made public, it's possible that the demands of show business, along with Stevens' quickly growing celebrity and hectic schedule, played a role. Given the short marriage's duration and its rather quiet conclusion, it appears that Stevens was a very private individual who refrained from disclosing the complexities of her personal life at a time when the media was starting to focus more intently on celebrities' private lives. California Governor Edmund G. Stevens rewarded him with a significant public position in January 1966. Pat Brown, who appointed her to the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute Advisory Board. Stevens's involvement in mental health advocacy, which had started to garner national prominence in the 1960s as awareness of mental illness and the need for reform in psychiatric care increased, was reflected in this esteemed position. As a well-known individual, Stevens utilized her position to advocate for mental health education and awareness, giving prominence and voice to a topic that was sometimes stigmatized or misinterpreted. Her engagement with the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute demonstrated her empathy as well as her desire to have a good influence outside of the entertainment industry. Stevens' appointment as chairperson of the California Council for Children, a group devoted to enhancing the lives of people with developmental impairments, that same year further highlighted her dedication to social causes. In his capacity as chairman, Stevens probably worked to dispel myths and advance more inclusive laws for kids and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities through lobbying, fundraising, and public education campaigns. Her efforts in this field were part of a larger cultural movement at the time that aimed to enhance the quality of life, educational opportunities, and services available to individuals with disabilities. In addition to demonstrating her humanitarian heart, Stevens's leadership in such a prominent role established her as a considerate, socially concerned actress who had a strong concern for underrepresented groups. Stevens's familial links also demonstrated her connection to literature and education. The Child in the Glass Ball is the book that made her Aunt Karen Stenker, a renowned novelist and educator, famous. Stevens's personal interest in child welfare and mental health advocacy may have been affected by this work's exploration of psychological and developmental problems pertaining to children. Stevens, who frequently portrayed people with emotional depth and sensitivity, perhaps found resonance in Uner's careful and academic approach to childhood development. Stevens's ideals and interests outside of her acting job might have been influenced by having such an academically and socially active family member. A startling and intensely personal revelation surfaced following Inger Stevens' untimely and terrible death In April 1970, Ike Jones, the first black graduate of UCLA's School of Theater, Film, and Television, and a trailblazing African-American film producer, asserted that he and Stevens had been secretly wed since 1961. Jones claims that the pair had exchanged vows in a private ceremony in Mexico, which was a daring and unusual gesture at a time when interracial marriages were still uncommon and frequently discouraged, especially in Hollywood, where image and public, an actor's career was greatly influenced by perception. Given the racial tensions and cultural taboos of the time, Stevens reportedly feared that disclosing the marriage might endanger her career, which is why they chose to keep it a secret. The lack of a formal marriage license, the fact that they lived apart and both continued to file their income taxes as single people, and other factors originally raised doubts about Jones's claim, but additional evidence supported his narrative. Carl O. Stenland, Stevens's brother, testified under oath when her estate entered probate court that his sister had, in fact, been married to Ike Jones and had kept the marriage a secret out of fear for her reputation and future employment. His affirmation played a significant role in the court case and provided Jones's allegation with vital credibility. Commissioner A. Edward Nichols of the Los Angeles Superior Court subsequently decided in Jones's favor, officially acknowledging him as Stevens's lawful spouse and designating him as the executor of her estate. The legal acknowledgement of their interracial marriage and the light it provided on the sacrifices Stevens had made to safeguard her profession in a sharply divided social environment made this decision historically significant. An image of Stevens and Jones together at a formal banquet in 1968 provided additional evidence of their relationship, an image that supported the story of their long-hidden bond with visual proof. Since then, the tale of their covert union has endured and grown to be a moving part of Inger Stevens' legacy, representing the complex relationships between race, love, and celebrity in mid-century America. Tragedy hit the peaceful Hollywood Hills neighborhood early on April 30, 1970, when Inger Stevens, a well-liked actress renowned for her subtle performances and understated grace, was found unconscious on her home's kitchen floor. Lola MCN, her lifelong girlfriend, roommate, and close friend, was the one who discovered her in this condition. McCann was one of the few people who was genuinely close to the fiercely private actress and had lived with Stevens for a while. When Mac discovered Stevens unconscious on the kitchen floor, he knew something was seriously up. She later described how Stevens momentarily opened her eyes and, in a tragic gesture, raised her head slightly, as if attempting to speak in the final seconds before losing consciousness entirely. Stevens appeared to be exerting herself, yet she was unable to speak, indicating that she was already experiencing a fast, worsening medical emergency. For McNally, the picture of Stevens at that frail and motionless moment would become a disturbing memory that emphasized how abrupt and startling the tragedy was. McNally said police detectives that she had spoken with Stevens the previous evening and that there had been no symptoms of concern or amiss during that discussion. Stevens had appeared calm on the outside, as she did so frequently during her life, but there may have been boiling mental agony beneath the surface. Later, friends and acquaintances echoed Mac's observation that Stevens had not shown signs of depression or distress in the days preceding her passing. This disparity between external appearance and internal suffering has frequently been observed in situations involving depression or suicidal thoughts, especially in prominent people who feel pressured to uphold a particular public persona. Stevens was taken by ambulance to the closest hospital, while Mac hurriedly called emergency services. Tragically, she passed away en route and never regained consciousness. Although paramedics responded quickly, there was nothing they could do to save her. When she arrived at the hospital, a small adhesive bandage was taken off of her chin, exposing a small but recent cut that was still bleeding. The wound was consistent with a fall, possibly from when she fell to the ground, and was thought to be a few hours old, indicating that the medical emergency had probably happened at some point during the night, long before McNall saw her. The autopsy was carried out by the now famous Los Angeles County coroner, Dr. Thomas Noguchi, who is frequently referred to as the coroner to the stars due to his involvement in numerous high-profile celebrity death investigations, including as that of Robert F. Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe, and Natalie Wood. As Dr. Noguchi concluded, Stevens's death was caused by acute barbiturate poisoning, a discovery that horrified her followers and the Hollywood world and rapidly made headlines. In the 1960s, barbiturates, which are depressants of the central nervous system, were often given for anxiety and sleep disturbances. However, they were also very addictive and often abused. Whether unintentional or deliberate, overdoses were very prevalent in this era, taking the lives of both normal people and many famous people. The death was finally determined to be a suicide after the toxicology findings were received, a decision that caused much conjecture and sadness. According to the verdict, Stevens may have purposefully consumed a fatal amount of the narcotics while alone herself in her house at what must have been a period of extreme hopelessness or emotional exhaustion. Those that were acquainted with her, it was challenging to believe her suicide verdict, particularly in light of her recent professional engagement and apparent success. Stevens was still an actor at the time of her passing, working on projects and talking about possible possibilities. This seeming conflict between her career success and personal desperation raised many unresolved issues and threw a dark cloud over her legacy. Tributes to a woman whose talent had affected many, but whose inner life had remained mostly unknown, flooded in from the entertainment world in the days and weeks that followed. Her death continues to be one of the more moving reminders of the hidden challenges that even the most glamorous lives may contain, and the mystery and tragedy of her last hours continue to captivate and sadden followers. For Stevens's close confidant Lola MCN, finding her friend in such a state would become a defining and painful episode in her own life, one that would always be associated with the tragic demise of a talented and complex actress. This